Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working a double shift covering for a sick co-worker, and by the time I clocked out, my feet were killing me, and all I wanted was to grab what I needed and crash. My old drill had finally died that morning, and I needed a replacement before tomorrow's job. Just my luck that the only store still open was across town. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in. I figured I'd be in and out in 10 minutes tops. I was still wearing my work gear since I came straight from the site. My vest had our company logo plastered across the back, my radio was clipped to my shoulder, and my certification badge dangled from my chest. Anyone with working eyes could see I wasn't a retail employee, but I guess that was asking too much. I made my way to the tool section and started comparing prices. I needed something decent but not too expensive. I was reading the specs on a cordless model when I heard someone behind me asking where the wax toilet rings were. I didn't turn around. There were other people nearby, and I assumed whoever it was would figure out I wasn't an employee. I kept looking at the drills. Then the same voice asked if I wanted to do my job or just stand there looking at tools. That made me look over my shoulder. I thought maybe some customer was giving an actual employee a hard time, which happened a lot at this location. Instead, I saw this guy in his 30s wearing a dress shirt and tie, staring directly at me like I'd just insulted his mother. I asked if I could help him. He yelled that yes, I could tell him where the wax rings were. It finally clicked what was happening. He thought I worked here. I started apologizing and tried to tell him I didn't work there, but he cut me off. He screamed that he didn't want to hear anything but an aisle number and asked how I got this job being so stupid. A couple of other shoppers turned to look. My jaw clenched, but I tried again to explain that I didn't work there. He interrupted again, shouting about why this was so hard and demanding to know where the wax rings were. Something snapped in me. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was his attitude, but I decided to have a little fun with this. I pointed at a random aisle behind him and told him it was right there. He yelled finally, called me foolish, and stormed off. I went back to comparing drills, figuring he'd realize his mistake and find someone who actually worked there. I was wrong. 2 minutes later, he was back, and he was furious. He screamed that I didn't even know how to do my job, and that his best friend was the district manager who would have my job for this. People were staring now. A small crowd had started forming. I raised my hand and pointed at the same aisle, telling him they were right there and asking if he could see them. Then I asked how foolish he could be. I threw his words right back at him, and his face went red. Before I could react, he smacked my hand down and shoved me hard in the chest. I stumbled back against the shelf. That was his mistake. I'm not some tough guy. I don't go looking for fights, but I grew up with 3 older brothers, and I know how to handle myself when I need to. More importantly, I know when someone's all bark and no bite. This guy clearly didn't know the difference. I punched him once, straight in the nose. There was a crack, and he went down hard, hitting the back of his head on the concrete floor. Blood started pooling under his skull almost immediately. He started screaming for someone to call the police, yelling that I had just attacked him. My stomach dropped. It was self-defense, but I kept thinking I should have just shoved him back. What if I'd seriously hurt him? What if the head injury was bad enough that I'd be the one in trouble? A manager pushed through the growing crowd and asked what was going on. The guy on the floor screamed that an employee had attacked him when he tried to ask for simple directions, and told everyone to look at what I did to him. Blood was pouring from both nostrils and spreading across the floor from where his head hit. The manager asked who did it, looking puzzled. The guy screamed again, asking if everyone was this foolish, and pointed at me. The manager looked at me, then at my vest, then back at him. He told the guy that I didn't work there. The manager got on his radio and asked me to follow him. He led me to the security office and told me to wait. My hands were shaking. I kept replaying the punch in my head, wondering if I'd gone too far. 20 minutes later, 2 officers came in. They said they'd talk to witnesses first while the paramedics checked on the other guy. The first officer said they needed my side of what happened. I told them everything. How he mistook me for an employee, how I tried to correct him multiple times, how he shoved me first. The second officer said that contradicted what the guy told them, but it matched what the witnesses said. He mentioned that the guy was demanding they arrest me and lock me up. The manager pulled up the security footage. It showed everything. The guy hitting my hand, shoving me backed against the shelves was nowhere to go, and then the single punch. Just one. The first officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. He wanted me arrested. He'd shoved me. He'd screamed at me. He'd embarrassed himself and tried to drag me down with him. I told them, heck yeah, lock him up. They left and came back 15 minutes later. Through the office window, I watched them walk him out in handcuffs, still yelling about how this was all wrong and how his friend, the district manager, would hear about this. The manager gave me a tired smile and told me I was free to go. I never did get that drill that night. I came back the next day during my lunch break. Different shift, different crowd, no drama. Just the way shopping should be. I grew up with my grandmother because my parents didn't want me. They were too busy getting high to care about raising a baby, so they handed me over to her the day I was born and just left. I never went home from the hospital with them. My grandmother became the only mother I ever knew. She had me young, married at 13, had my father at 14, so she wasn't as old as most grandmothers by the time I came along. She had full custody from day one because my parents couldn't be bothered. Living with her was complicated. She had a temper that could explode at the slightest thing, going from calm to absolutely unhinged in less than a second. But she was also weirdly obsessive about me in a way that wasn't healthy. It was like I belonged to her and nobody else was allowed to touch me, even though she wasn't exactly kind to me herself. The hypocrisy was obvious, but that's how it was. She's been dead 10 years now, and I still have nightmares about her, if that tells you anything. When I was in 5th grade, there was this kid who lived near us who absolutely hated me. The feeling was mutual. He was aggressive and mean, and the problem between us just kept getting worse. I wasn't allowed outside much as a kid, so most of the time he bullied me at school. The staff usually looked the other way when it happened. One day he caught me between classes where nobody could see and beat the crap out of me. I came home with a fat lip and a giant bruise spreading across my face. When my grandmother saw me, something inside her just snapped. She grabbed my hand and we walked straight to his house. I was terrified the whole way there because I knew the mood she was in, and I was also scared of him and his mother. I stood in the driveway practically vibrating with anxiety while my grandmother knocked on the door. When his mother opened it, she looked at my grandmother with pure disrespect written all over her face. She asked what my grandmother wanted, in a tone that made it clear she didn't care. My grandmother told her that her son had put his hands on me. The woman responded by asking what my grandmother expected her to do about it, like it wasn't even her problem. She didn't even try to deny it. She just lit a cigarette and blew the smoke right in my grandmother's face, daring her to do something about it. Now, my grandmother wasn't a big woman. She was about 5'5", average build, not physically intimidating at all. The other woman was about the same height but much heavier, outweighing her by at least 60 pounds. She clearly wasn't impressed that my grandmother had shown up at her door, and she didn't care about what her son had done or how my grandmother felt about it. That was a mistake. About half a second after that smoke hit her face, my grandmother grabbed the woman by her hair and yanked her out of her own house. She dragged her onto the porch and then threw her off it, face first, following her down into the yard with absolute murder in her eyes. Their trailer was set up higher than normal, so it was actually a pretty decent drop. I genuinely thought I was about to witness a death. When my grandmother snapped like that, she was capable of almost anything. The other woman took the fall hard but came up swinging. She managed to hit my grandmother's cheek before my grandmother grabbed her hair again and flung her back to the ground. My grandmother hit her a few more times before the woman managed to pull her down too. Then they were both rolling around in the dirt like wild animals, snarling and swearing and clawing at each other. It got ugly fast. The other woman was tough, I'll give her that. She was holding her own for a minute, giving as good as she got. But she wasn't ready for what my grandmother was capable of. They wrestled on the ground for a while before my grandmother got her on her back and started punching her in the face while sitting on her chest. Then the woman made a terrible mistake. She tried to use one of her legs to either flip my grandmother off or kick her in the face. I'm not sure which, but the end result was that her bare foot got way too close to my grandmother's mouth. My grandmother's response was to turn her head and bite one of the woman's toes clean off at the joint and spit it right back into her face. I will never forget the look on that woman's face. It was pure shock mixed with horror and confusion, followed immediately by the worst pain I'd ever seen someone experience. She started howling and screaming. The whole time my grandmother kept hitting her, but now the woman wasn't trying to fight back anymore. She was just trying to get away because she finally realized my grandmother was genuinely insane and absolutely capable of killing her without a second thought. That's when the cops showed up. They had to pry my grandmother's hands from around the woman's throat to separate them. The woman was unconscious by that point and turning purple. One officer put my grandmother in the squad car with me beside her while the other one called an ambulance and looked for the toe. Then came the explanations. Most people would have been in serious trouble at that point, but my grandmother was the best actress I've ever seen in my life. If she'd gone into movies or theater, she would have won every award there was. It was extraordinary how she could rewrite entire events, and even if you knew she was lying, she'd have you believing her version and questioning your own memory. The story she told the cops was a masterpiece. She said that I'd come home from school after being assaulted by the boy, and that she just wanted to talk to his mother about his behavior and try to work something out between our families in a responsible way. But when she knocked and the woman answered, the woman was hostile from the start and eventually got physically aggressive when my grandmother said she'd be reporting the boy's behavior to the authorities if his mother didn't handle it. Then came the performance. Tears started sliding down my grandmother's face, and she used this shaky, frail old lady voice to say that we'd turned to leave, but that the woman pushed me off the porch. After I hit the ground, she tried to do the same thing to my grandmother, but my grandmother had grabbed her reflexively when she fell. They ended up falling together with my grandmother on top. My grandmother said the bruise on my face came from that fall, not the earlier attack at school, and that once they were on the ground, she'd just lost control. She asked the officer if he could really blame her for losing it like that. She explained that the woman had just assaulted her and her grandchild, and she was just one old lady. She said she was so scared that if the woman got up, she'd hurt one or both of us, and my grandmother wouldn't be able to stop her again because it was only luck that put her on top when they fell. The whole time she cried quietly. Not big dramatic sobs, nothing showy, just silent tears sliding down her face and that tiny, trembling old lady voice when she apologized for her actions because she was just so scared. Then the officer looked at me and asked if that was what happened. It was a terrifying moment. I'd like to say I told the truth and did the right thing and was honest with him, but I can't because that would be a lie. I absolutely did not do any of those things. Instead, I looked at my grandmother and let all the fear and stress of the situation just wash over me. Then I used that emotion to burst into tears myself. I didn't talk, just nodded my head and cried and clung to my grandmother, who stroked my hair and rocked me back and forth. I tried my best not to look the officer in the eyes because I knew I wasn't a good enough liar to pull it off if he was looking right at me. So I just hid my face against my grandmother's shirt and did my best to seem traumatized. He bought it completely. The other woman ended up being arrested for child abuse, assault, disturbing the peace, and possession of an illegal substance because when they searched her, they found a small bag of drugs in her clothes. This was the mid-90s, so that possession charge was serious and carried heavy penalties. She also ended up being responsible for my grandmother's hospital bill for the sprained wrist she got from beating the woman's face like a drum. The toe never got reattached, and the woman ultimately lost her job and went to jail for 4 months. She was on probation for 3 years after that. My grandmother didn't catch a single charge from that day. The boy and his family eventually moved away from the trailer park. I lost my service dog to cancer on the 3rd of this year. She'd been with me for 5 years, and thinking about her brings back this memory from when I was 13. My dog was a psychiatric service dog. She was trained to help me avoid anxiety attacks that could lead to me hurting myself or others, and she could alert me when I was about to pass out. She was a Chihuahua and Dachshund mix, so she was pretty small, but she was amazing at her job. She didn't wear a vest because it got in the way of her work and made my disability worse, which meant she didn't need one under the law. But her leash had big letters on it that said anxiety service dog and do not pet. I used to go to the mall every week because I had ice skating classes there. This week I decided to stop by the GameStop before my lesson. There was an employee there who I'd gotten pretty friendly with over the months, and I wanted to say hi. Plus, I was thinking about getting a new game for my Switch. I was standing there looking at a copy of Minecraft when my dog positioned herself behind me. That was one of her tasks. When she sensed I needed more personal space to prevent an episode, she'd create a barrier between me and other people. Having people too close to me is a huge trigger for my anxiety. That's when I heard a woman's voice behind me. She was cooing at my dog, calling her a cute puppy. Before I could even turn around, she'd already picked up my dog, my working service dog, right off the ground. I asked her politely to please not pick her up because she was working and needed to stay focused. The woman yelled that my dog didn't have a vest, so it was fine. I started to explain that by law, she didn't need one if the vest interfered with her work, but the woman cut me off again. She screamed that my dog was her daughter's therapy dog. I looked around. She was alone. There was no daughter anywhere near us, but I couldn't focus on that because I could feel it starting. The dizziness, the tunnel vision. My dog was struggling in this woman's arms, trying to get back to me so she could do her job, but the woman just held on tighter. That's when my friend from the store came over. She told the woman to please let go of the dog because she was a working dog and what she was doing was illegal. She explained that the woman was distracting a working service dog. The woman just kept yelling something, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Everything was going fuzzy. I felt myself falling, and then everything went black. What happened next was told to me by my employee friend later. She said that the second I started falling, the woman dropped my dog. Just let her go. My dog fell face first onto the floor from about 6 feet up, because this woman was tall, somewhere between 6 feet and 6'3". But my dog got right back up and ran to me. She started doing her tasks, licking my face, lying on my stomach, trying to wake me up. But I wasn't waking up. I'd hit my head pretty hard on one of the glass display cases when I fell, and I was out cold. The employee called 911 right away. When I finally came to, I was surrounded by mall security and police officers. One of the cops was putting handcuffs on the woman. She was yelling and screaming about how unfair it all was, but nobody was listening to her anymore. I was still pretty out of it, but I could feel my dog pressed against my side. She was shaking, but she hadn't left me. The paramedics checked me over right there in the store. I had a nasty bump on my head, and they were worried about a concussion, but they said I'd be okay. The cops wanted to talk to me about what happened. That's when I found out exactly what the woman was being charged with: assault, animal cruelty, attempted robbery, distracting a service dog, and attempted murder. Because I could have died when I hit my head, because she prevented my service dog from doing the job that keeps me safe. My employee friend had recorded some of it on her phone after she realized what was happening. The woman screaming that my dog was her daughter's dog, my dog falling, me hitting the ground, all of it. The cops asked if I wanted to press charges, if I wanted to pursue this. But honestly, I just wanted to go home. My parents didn't have the time or money to deal with the whole legal thing. I was already missing school for medical appointments and therapy. We just didn't have the energy for it. I know that probably sounds stupid, but that's where we were at. The cops said they understood, but that they were still charging her with what they could based on what happened and what they witnessed. I ended up being okay. My dog ended up being okay too, even though she'd been dropped on her face. The vet checked her out and said she was just bruised, but nothing was broken. But the whole thing could have been so much worse. If the display case had broken when I hit it, if my dog had been hurt worse, if I'd hit my head at a different angle, all because some woman decided that my medical equipment was a cute puppy she could just pick up. People need to understand something. Service dogs aren't pets. They're not there for you to play with or touch or pick up. They're medical equipment. They're working. And when you distract them or interfere with them, you're putting someone's life at risk. My dog saved my life more times than I can count over those 5 years. She deserved to do her job without people grabbing her because they thought she was cute. She was cute. She was the best. But she was working and that should have been respected. Just leave service dogs alone. It's that simple. They're very good at their jobs and they're very cute while doing it, but they're not there for your entertainment. They're there to keep someone safe, maybe even alive. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.